All right, this time I'd like to welcome my guest, Tracy.
Hello.
Today we are talking about trauma, and unfortunately, the type of trauma that we are going to be talking about is something that's become more common for people in this country, people who've been a part of or survived some type of mass shooting in this country. Just to give you a little background on Tracy, she was a part of the Route 91 shooting here in Las Vegas that happened October 1st, 2017. So I really appreciate her coming in and talking about her experience. Just to kind of give you a little background, as far as our connection, back when I started out in my first agency at Bridge Counseling in 2003 or 2002. She worked there as the office manager type person.
Something like that. Yeah. I had a few different hats, but
right.
yeah.
Yeah. So that was how we first kind of met, and then really haven't had much content since. We've both been living our lives in different aspects of things. But then a person that knew me and knew her thought this would be a good episode for the show. So that's how we kind of came back together. So some of my guests in the past have been clients I've had, so I've been able to kind of, help them with their story and bring that to the podcast. So this is going to be a little bit different because it is a very sensitive topic as far as dealing with this type of trauma. So I hope that everybody is sensitive to that's listening. And so if there's any kind of like pauses or moments where we got to catch our breath, that's just what is going to be there. So, but I definitely appreciate her coming on. So I guess just to kind of start off, if people aren't familiar with the Route 91 incident here, I'm sure most people are, as far as the history of that and what happened in Vegas on that day. But it was a country concert outdoor that again there was a mass shooting at. So if you just want to just kind of start off by just telling us about your experience that night, and we'll kind of just walk through that part of it.
Yeah. So that was the last night of the festival. It's a 3-day. Starts on Friday afternoon. Goes all Friday night, Saturday all day into the night, and then all day Sunday. It was the last day of the festival, and it was the very last act. So the big headliner, Jason Aldean, and he was only maybe 2 or 3 songs into his set. And a little bit of background, that wasn't the first year for that festival. That was the 3rd year that they'd done it, and it'd been all 3 years. So it was kind of a tradition that I was developing that I loved. The first year I went with a close coworker, and then the 2nd year I went with one of my best friends. And the 3rd year, I went with my boyfriend. And so last night of the festival, we'd had a great time all 3 days. I'm a huge country music fan.
Don't hold that against her.
And so we were very, very close to the stage, and he was starting one of his big songs, and all of a sudden it was kind of like fireworks. It sounded like black cats, like pop, 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 like going off, and it stopped, and everybody was just kind of like, he kept playing, and then it started again, and it just really didn't stop. After that, it was constant for about like over 10 minutes. Once people actually realized what was happening, it was just mass chaos. People running, screaming. It seemed like every time there was a pause in the gunfire, which I'm assuming he was reloading, it would pause, and everybody that was, that had been crouched down and would get up and start running, and it would start again. And it was, I feel like it was a lot of a fish in a barrel situation. There were obviously thousands of people there. He focused right at the front of the stage where the most majority of the people were. I had friends that were with me at the concert also who were way, way further back. Like there's an area that they set up every year where you can bring your camping chairs, and you can kind of like sit further back so you're not like squished like sardines. And the friends that I was with actually were not with me up at the front. It was just my boyfriend and I. And my boyfriend's in the Air Force and is trained to respond and react in those situations. So when it first started happening, and everybody realized that it was like gunfire, not fireworks, it was kind of like he was telling everybody, get down, don't move. We didn't know where it was coming from, whether it was multiple people, one person, whether they were inside the grounds, and outside. It took quite a while for anybody to realize that it was coming from way above the festival grounds and, you know, across the street. So he was telling everybody to get down and kind of like shielding quite a few, even the people that were around us that he didn't know. He was like laying on top of us. We started hearing just like obviously mass hysteria, chaos, people screaming. Looked over, and maybe 15 feet from us there was a man that was unfortunately shot in the head, and my boyfriend went to assist that, and in the next 30 seconds, I would say, is when it really like started to just get insane, and people were everywhere, trampling over people, just trying to get, nobody knew where it was coming from. So you got people running in all different directions, people trying to find cover, people trying to get out. There was a lot of people who apparently it was their first year there and they didn't know where the exits were. It's kind of the way that they had it. There are exits to the side, but they're not very well known. I knew that they were there because it was my third year there.
Right.
And but the way that they had it set up this year was one main entrance, and that's kind of the way that they funneled everybody out at the end of the night. So that's the way that everybody was trying to get out. I myself, after about 30 seconds of my boyfriend going to the right to help, couldn't see him anymore. And that's kind of when I started to panic, because then I'm alone in this situation that I've never been in before, and I really don't know what's happening, again, where it's coming from, how serious. Nobody knew how serious it was going to be. At that point, that whole fight or flight kicks in, and I 100% flight. I ended up going over the barrier that was in the middle, that was kind of like, there was two main sections where everybody was standing, but in the middle, the sound stage was way far back away from the main stage, and they had this kind of like walkway in the middle. So I went over that because I was right next to it, and ended up kind of like army crawling all the way underneath the sound stage, where all that equipment was, and was under there for quite a while with people running by, other people coming in, trying to squeeze under there. Just everybody was trying to get to a point where they thought they weren't going to get hit. I had a woman bleeding profusely laying on top of me for a good 5 minutes before whoever she was with, her boyfriend, husband, something, kind of took her by the arms and just drug her off of me, and continued to drag her out of the festival grounds. I stayed underneath that soundstage until there was a long enough, and it felt like probably 5 minutes, but I know it wasn't. It was probably more like 45 seconds worth of pause. And then in my head, it was kind of, I need to get out of here, because I don't know where it's coming from. I don't know if this is, again, more than one person. I don't know if they're walking through the crowd. I don't know what's happening.
Yeah, if they're coming towards something. Or,
exactly.
Yeah, like what? Yeah.
So, I kind of crawled my way out from underneath that and ran to the exit on the side that I knew was there, and got outside of the gates of the festival, and I kind of just collapsed, crying, shaking. I was, that whole time that I was underneath there, I was calling my boyfriend. I was alternating between calling my boyfriend and calling my ex-husband.
So now your boyfriend, just so people remember, so he's off now helping people.
Yeah, I have no idea where he
know,
is.
but
I
you think he's helping people.
He went, you know, after laying on top of us and then realizing that it wasn't going to stop and we could see people that were being struck and being hit. His first reaction is, as a first responder and in the military, to start helping. Again, nobody knew it was going to last as long as it did, or it was going to be as astronomical as it was. So me not being able to see him or get a hold of him anymore,
pretty intense emotion, I'm sure.
Super scary. So
what were you calling your ex-husband, just to try to see if he knew what was happening, or if he
I was calling my
somebody for comfort or something?
I was calling my ex-husband because at that time I didn't know what the outcome was going to be. I didn't know if I was going to make it. I didn't know what was going to happen. My ex-husband had my daughter at home, and I was calling him to tell him, like, hey, if I don't make it out of here, at least, you know, here's my things. Please tell my daughter I love her, you know, that kind of thing. So once I finally got a hold of him and he realized what was happening, he stayed on the phone with me for quite a bit. And then I was like, I need to find my boyfriend, and I need to figure out how to get out of here and not be in this area anymore. So when I got out of the festival grounds and kind of like collapsed, I was in shock. At that point, I don't remember if the gunfire was still happening. I just remember this really nice young man picking me up, grabbing me and saying, we can't stay here, we have to go, we have to move. And took me across the street behind where the main stage was. I don't know the name of that road that runs right next to Mandalay Bay.
Yeah, it's a weird road.
Yeah, it's very windy and goes behind that whole section.
Yeah.
But he apparently, and this is how I know it had been going on for a little bit, and I was there for quite a while, because he was like, there's somebody over here that's opened their apartment to people.
Oh, wow.
In those apartments that are like right kind of across from Mandalay Bay. And he took me over there, and literally there was probably, we went up these stairs, and he did this kind of random knock on this door. There was a guy that opened it, and he had a shotgun in his hand. And he was like, come in quick. And when I got in there, all the lights were off, and there was probably 40 people in a 1-bedroom apartment.
Wow.
And it's everybody from the festival. Obviously, these people that opened their door were not at the festival, but could hear what was going on. And I stayed in there in the dark with all of these people, and we're all freaking out. We don't know what's going on. I'm still trying to call my boyfriend. I finally got a hold of him. I want to say, and again, my timelines are very skewed, but it had to have been over an hour later. Finally got a hold of him, and he was just as glad to hear from me as I was from him, because for him, once he went to help the person that was about 15 feet from us, when he turned around, I was gone.
Oh, really?
When he realized that there was no helping that person, and he needed to figure out how to get us out, he turned around and I was already gone, because I couldn't see him anymore, and I didn't know I wasn't going to run around in this big open area where people are getting shot. So yeah, like when he went right and I couldn't see him anymore, that's when I went left. So he had spent all of that time in the festival grounds and helping, and in his words, like every time he turned somebody over or saw, because there was quite a few females with the same hat that I had on, he you know, was basically
Right.
looking through piles of people for me.
Oh wow.
And so once I finally got a hold of him, I went back out of the apartment, met up with him on that back street that was behind the stage. He was covered in blood. I didn't know if he was shot, hurt. He was missing a shoe. We both went back in. I took him back to that apartment. We were in there for probably another hour.
Mm-hmm.
I say we. About 20 minutes after him being there, we could hear like all of the sirens and all of the, and I'm guessing in his head he was thinking there's not enough help out there, so he left and he went back out, and continued to help and continued to, at that point there was no more gunfire, so I wasn't as, I mean, I was very much in shock, and it even took me probably a good 15 minutes to realize that he wasn't in the apartment with me, because there was so many people and there was so much going on. So about an hour passed and he was texting me. During this time, my phone is completely blowing up because everybody that knew that I was there, my mom is freaking out, my sister, my coworkers are calling me, my boss is calling me, everybody that I know is trying to check in and make sure that I'm okay. And the phone lines are just jammed. You can't get a call out. Every time you try and call, it's just a busy signal no matter who you're calling. So I was doing a lot of texting, like, I'm safe, but I don't know what's happening. And I'll let you know when I do.
Yeah.
So again, that was at the end of the night. It was after 10 o'clock when Jason Aldean started playing. And so by the time it got to a point where we figured, okay, it's safe to leave. There's nothing else happening. It's just police activity outside. It was well after 1 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, was that long?
And so when he came back with no shirt, still covered in more blood. He had taken his shirt off to rip up into tourniquets, and was loading people into trucks and cars that were going to hospitals. And it was one of those, I mean, they had the whole area on lockdown.
Right.
We couldn't get out. We ended up walking from this apartment all the way basically to Thomas and Mack.
Oh, wow.
To get to a point where we could have somebody come pick us up. And it was very surreal doing that, because as we're walking by the east side of the festival grounds, and we're walking by people that are, extremely hurt, and we're unfortunately walking by bodies, walking by people that are sitting with loved ones and they're not there. You can see that they're gone, and these people are just sitting with these bodies crying, and it was all very, very surreal. Like, I was like, this can't be real life. This can't be happening. And
now that was like outside of, like, because I got called to do like a trauma thing, like the next day, to go to like one of the, like, there was like I don't know what you call them, like a timeshare place that was not too far away from it. And they had people that had, did the same thing. They kind of busted into the lobby and stuff, and were just looking for shelter. But there was also a few people that had died in the parking lot because they were running, and then they just died from their injuries. So is that kind of what you saw? Like, this was away from the actual event, but they had passed away.
Like as they were leaving. So Yeah, walking away from the festival grounds, it's that, again, that weird road that's
Yeah.
back, and it ends up, it
Mhm.
curves and it goes around, and you end up right by the executive airport, that one area of McCarran where they do the private flights and stuff like that.
Right.
And you're absolutely correct. We were walking by businesses where people had broken down doors and stuff to get in.
Mhm.
There's just trails of blood. There's, just, again, people sitting on the sidewalk. We're walking, and ambulances are coming by us, and they're stopping because he's covered head to toe in blood, and they're like, do you need help? And he's like, I'm fine. And for me, I didn't even know. Like, I was just like, are you sure you're not?
Right.
He's like, I would know if I was shot somewhere, and this is all just everybody else's stuff.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, we basically walked almost all the way to Thomas and Mack, and had his dad come pick us up and take us home.
Mhm.
And it's been not an easy road since then.
Right.
Neither one of us left the house for well over a week.
Oh wow.
And even when I went back to work, it was extremely hard to just be around people. It was all very sensory overload. It was hard to focus, hard to concentrate. And it was probably like 3 weeks later, I was back at work, and I still wasn't working full days. It was extremely exhausting, and somebody in my office, and it's little things like this that you don't think affect people, but if you, again, somebody in my office had like a huge sheet of bubble wrap that they decided to twist, and it was, and I completely like lost it. Like, I under my desk, like full on panic attack, like it wasn't good. And no fair to that person, they
Right.
didn't, they didn't realize that was, but
they were having fun with
Yep.
bubble wrap and
So
didn't realize that
that's kind of the gist of that story. There's a lot of it that I'm still unfortunately remembering. Our brains are such wonderful
Right.
things that
Yeah.
I thought I was okay for a while, and then right about the 1 year anniversary, I just started having horrible nightmares again, and it's just like it's almost like you can't wake up. Like, you wake up from this dream that you're having where you're reliving everything that you went through,
Mhm.
and your brain is also releasing things that you didn't remember, because my brain blocked out a lot of what happened in that time frame.
Okay. Mm.
So I start having, dreams and remembering things that I didn't know happened. And that's scary. That's horrible.
Yeah. Right.
And it's just kind of been, it's still not easy. I mean, I'm still in therapy. It's extremely difficult to talk about. I don't talk about it at all. I try not to.
It's not an easy subject, that's for sure. I mean, especially when you look at some of the things, and I definitely appreciate you sharing this with other people and people that are listening that have been through trauma. I'm sure they can relate. And I mean, obviously you can't see it on a podcast, but just maybe even hearing it in your voice, you can tell there's still like a lot of emotion that goes along with it. And if you were watching yourself, like I'm watching you, I mean, just as you were talking about the events, you can kind of just see in your mind how you're tracking it, and you're looking at the places, and you just kind of know. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of, even though you, like I said, they don't necessarily remember everything, there's a lot of just, just the focus there that you can see where you're reliving it as you kind of talk about it and see those things. And I'm sure a lot of that imaging and different things is as clear as as it was when it happened, which I'm sure
I can still like smell. I get like it's horrible, but I will still get flash, and I can smell like open wounds and like massive amounts of blood, and I don't think I'll ever get that smell out of my nose, to be honest. Like, every once in a while, even if I'm doing nothing remotely that should trigger that, like I just get this overwhelming smell of gunpowder and like blood, and it's overwhelming. It's just kind of like, why?
Right. Well, so speaking of triggers and stuff, like so if people are familiar with trauma, obviously triggers can be associated with severe trauma. some triggers can be loosely associated with it. Some are very specific. Kind of like the bubble wrap thing. I mean, it's specific in the sense of like the sound and kind of what that does. But like, what have you noticed over the time, like as far as like some of those triggers, like what can kind of pop up for you, or what has popped up for you in relation to that?
So unfortunately, I can't even listen to any Jason Aldean song anymore, not just that one, but if I even hear the beginning of that song, I am like completely thrown into anxiety, panic, like, so that's been rough because he was one of my favorite artists, and it's hard for me to not. I mean, just hearing even the beginning, like music notes of one of his songs, I have to change the station. Obviously, loud noises, anything that resembles gunfire, which is weird for me. I grew up in Texas, and I'm a hunter, and I've got guns in my house and rifles, and
so you can be around guns? Is that
I can
okay
be around guns. Like
okay.
I took a hunting trip in October that I thought was going to be super hard for me.
Yeah.
And it wasn't. So that was odd to me because I thought that I was going to have a real issue. But when I thought about it afterwards, when I got back and realized that I didn't have any of the issues that I thought that I would, it's a very different when you're hunting. And as a responsible hunter, you really only take a shot if you know you're going to. So, I heard like maybe 3 shots, and they were single shots, and I could tell, it's happening right. I wasn't taken off guard. I wasn't, like it's not
you're prepared for.
Yeah, absolutely. So that didn't affect me the way that I thought it would. But even things like going to the Knights games, super, super hard for me still. There's coping mechanisms that I have to use, and I can't be around big people, open spaces. Lots of people in open spaces. That kind of sets me off, and I go through some anxiety there. But not for me that I've found, not a whole lot of triggers.
Okay. Because I know, like, some, like you mentioned a few of these things too, like some of the common reactions that can come from trauma, things like anxiety, flashbacks, being easily startled, maybe even some depression, losing interest in certain things, and then also avoidance behaviors, which kind of comes around to the fact that, like as far as avoidance, then like what things have been sort of off limits for you, like things that maybe I don't want to do, or can't do, maybe even, I don't know.
So concerts are really, really hard. And I don't know the exact timeline, but it was, we're over 2 years now. And I don't know how long it took me to even get to the point that I was like, okay, maybe I could go to a concert again. But that's super, super difficult for me. The place that I'm at right now, I can't ever see myself ever going to an outdoor concert ever again. I'm hoping I can get past that at some point, with enough like working through it and all of that. But right now, just even the thought of that is absolutely terrifying. I know that they'll never use that space again. They've completely that's not ever going to happen. But even when I think about like they've got
Life is Beautiful,
or they've got a really same kind of concept, like a 3-day festival that they do in California. That's all country music, Stagecoach. Like that was something that I always wanted to do, and now I'm just kind of like, I don't think I'll ever be able to, and that's unfortunate for me. But things like that. Like,
what about the Strip itself? I mean,
the Strip is like a no-go for me. Again, it's definitely the south end of the Strip is ground zero for me. It's like it reminds me of like a war zone. I can't be down there. I can't look at it. I can't look at Mandalay Bay without getting anxiety, even though obviously it didn't happen at Mandalay Bay, but it happened from Mandalay Bay, and just looking at that kind of immediately puts me back in that place where I'm like, I'm not safe. Even being, for anybody that goes to any of the Knights games, it's really, really hard for me to be in that plaza outside of T-Mobile Arena because it's surrounded by hotels. And I, again, get this feeling like I'm a fish in a barrel, and I don't know who could be in those rooms doing what or why.
Right.
And again, Las Vegas has increased a lot of their security measures, especially when it comes to hotels. But for me, that's still extremely difficult. I try not to spend any more time than necessary out there. It's like kind of like park and get inside like immediately, because it gives me a lot of anxiety.
Right,
It makes me very uncomfortable.
Right. Well, that's understandable. I mean, I think, again, those are the things that sort of tend to accommodate trauma, unfortunately, is that things and anxiety, reminders, things that can trigger us. Obviously, if I'm, like you've been able to kind of work through some of that. One of the things, like when I kind of work with people as far as trauma goes, we talk about like it's called, well, like kind of make a list, like a hierarchy of things. Like, okay, so obviously, going down by Mandalay Bay might be like on the 100 level, like that just feels like nothing. Then outdoor concerts might be on there, and then you kind of work your way down to things that are kind of similar, or have a similar kind of thing, to where it's like maybe at some point I can like start to build myself back up to like feeling more comfortable with things. So obviously the Knights game, that's been one of the things you've been able to do. Like, is it the same thing, like TV shows or anything like that you haven't been able to do, that you've found yourself, okay, I'm getting more comfortable in going to these places, or anything like that? Have you seen yourself kind of work through some other type of scenarios where it's,
Yes and no. I mean, there's part of me that is kind of like, again, and when I go down to T-Mobile for a game, that's literally the only time I go to the Strip. I'd just rather not at this point be anywhere near that, because it's still, even if I'm not on the south end of the Strip, it still invokes some sort of anxiety and reaction within me. So I'm just now getting to the point that I feel like I can try and start to navigate that. Maybe someplace that's, like on the north end of the Strip. But for me, like the entire Strip just seems...
You don't want to go to Circus.
Well, no, definitely not Circus. But like something like more towards the middle, of Caesars or Bellagio or something like that. But then I go back to even before Route 91, like I really didn't ever go down there. So it's kind of like... It's something that within myself, I'm kind of like, if I can get over this, then maybe at some point I can be back down on that end of the Strip. But in my head, I'm like, why though? Because I didn't go down there really ever anyways. But there are some shows and concerts that happen on the Strip that I would like to go see, that I just will not allow myself to, because I don't want to. I know that I'm just going to be thrown into that and then have to deal with that and either leave or try and work through it. And it's something, but like that, like the Strip. TV shows and movies, not really. I have an issue if I fall asleep with the TV on, which I try not to do a lot. I've found that there's been a few times that I've fallen asleep, and like Friday or Saturday I'm watching TV late or watching a movie, and then I wake up because whatever is on the TV, whatever movie it may be, has like rapid gunfire in it, and that wakes me up, and then I'm just like, okay, why did I do that? Because then I'm like, then I'm up for the rest of the night, and I can't, like, I kind of have to.
You're like, thank you very much.
TV
show.
Exactly. I'm like, that was nice. And so, but things like that. I still have like, and this is the one that baffles me. Like, I have night terrors that I don't even know that I'm having. Like, my boyfriend will wake me up and he's like, you were screaming. And I'm like, okay, because I don't remember what I was dreaming about, but it obviously wasn't good. But there's definitely things that that I think twice about now before I go.
For sure.
I mean, you talked about just withdrawal, and I would just prefer never to leave my house if I could. Like, I feel like that's my safe space, and if I'm there, like, what happened to me can never happen to me again, kind of thing. I'm just like, well, if I just don't go anywhere, then some crazy person with a gun can't come in and start like ruining my life again.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But that's giving that a lot of power.
Absolutely.
You don't
And I don't
do
want that. Like, I
Right,
want my
right.
normal back. And I
Yeah.
just have to realize that what my normal was is not ever going to be my normal again.
Yeah.
And that's been really hard for me to deal with.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was gonna say, how has the healing process been then in general for you? I mean, obviously, like you mentioned before, you go to therapy. I mean, has that been your primary source, which is not a bad thing, but like, how has that gone for you as far as healing?
So therapy's been great. I did not go for quite a while. I'm super stubborn and hard-headed. I went right afterwards at the push of a lot of people in my life. Like, you can't deal with this on your own. And I was kind of in a spot and a place where I was like, yeah, I can. Like, I'm fine. Like, but I realized after a while that there were just things that I couldn't navigate on my own. Therapy's helped me a lot just because it does give me a safe space and an outlet to talk about anything, but a lot of this, and healing from it, and kind of like grieving that part of me that is not there anymore. It's like you lose a part of you. You lose, or I feel like I did.
Yeah. Well, there's some
just-
innocence lost because
Yeah, absolutely.
the world changes, right? I mean, it's like,
Absolutely.
now this world is just like more, like maybe a little bit more reality if it's a dangerous place or something. I mean, if that's like I don't know if that's how you
100%.
think of it, or
Yeah, it's one of those. Again, that was my third year there. I was having a great time. You never think that something like that is going to happen to you where you are with what you're doing, and especially at like a country music festival concert. I mean, that's not to say it couldn't happen at any concert, but
Right.
or festival or anything like that. It's just kind of one of those, and the fact of the matter is, we still don't know why he did it. There was no manifesto. They've investigated so much, and it's just, you can't help crazy. Crazy is going to be crazy no matter what environment they're in, whether they're in prison or they're out wandering the streets like a lot of them are. So
yeah,
it's just one of those things. Therapy's helped me a lot, and it's helped me realize that it's definitely not something I can do on my own. It's still not something that I can do on my own, but it gives me the tools to like navigate the anxiety attacks, like how to start to try and regain some of my life back.
yeah.
So it's helped.
Well, yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think that what I've found, and I've heard this even from other people, is that when people go through a difficult trauma like that, you would think that the notion would be like, yeah, let me get immediately into therapy. But I've actually heard it the same way as you described it. May not always be stubbornness, but
Yeah.
for whatever reasons, like they don't want to jump right into and talking about it. And so if that's been anybody that's listening, or if you know people, if that's been their process with that, it's not necessarily that uncommon. But I think, like you said, though, eventually it's like, okay, I need to get to that place where if I am going to heal and kind of work through this and get to a better place, I think it's a pretty necessary part. So, but I'm glad that you shared that part of it, because I think it is difficult to kind of go back in and think, okay, how, to start approaching that and talking about it. It's not easy.
It's rough.
Yeah.
I was in the mindset that if I ignore it for long enough, it'll go away.
Yeah.
And
I've
it
heard
just,
that too.
yeah, it just wasn't going away, and it was in fact getting worse. The things that I would go through when I was having a hard day, or if I'd been triggered by something, it got to the point that I was self-medicating. I'm obviously on medication for anxiety and stuff like that, but I would, it's a Band-Aid, it's not a fix. I'd go home and have a few more drinks than I probably should to try and numb that, and then like I'd be like, okay, well now it's not bothering me anymore because I can't feel it.
Yeah.
Or even going to the Knights games, it's like I'd have to medicate myself, so just to try and like get through it.
Right.
And that's not the way that I want to live my life. And it just got to the point that I was just like, I have to figure out a different way to deal with this, and actually address the issues that are happening, instead of trying to Band-Aid them and mask them and just brush over them, because
Yeah.
if I don't fix them, I'm constantly going to be this way, and this isn't the way that I want to live my life.
Right. Or like you said, or you're just in this avoidance pattern of
Yep.
like, I'm just sitting in my house, hanging out, not whatever,
Yep.
and then life's just kind of passing me by, and I don't get to participate in things that could be enjoyable, but I'm just not allowing myself to do that part. So another thing I'm curious about, because obviously you experienced this with your boyfriend.
Yeah.
Still, that's still the same boyfriend?
Oh yeah,
Okay,
absolutely.
all right.
He's
So,
a huge support system.
right. So he, I mean, obviously he experienced a level of trauma himself.
Absolutely.
So how does that work within your relationship? I mean, do you guys talk about it together? Do you kind of do your own separate thing, or how does that work?
There are times that we definitely talk about it together. Like, if I'm having a bad day or he's having a bad day, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be related to this. It's let's talk about it. Let's talk about why, or if we're out together, and one of us is having a hard time being out, like his triggers are different than my triggers, obviously.
Yeah.
His experience that night are
or,
completely different than mine once we got separated and it turned into mass chaos.
right.
And so, there are nights and times that we sit and talk about what happened for him versus what happened for me. Obviously, what we wish we could have done differently. He, I think, still holds a lot of guilt and feels horrible about the fact that he wasn't there necessarily with me, like, and that I had to go through that alone. But again, we didn't know that it was going to be what it was when he went, one way to help. No part of him ever thought that, hey, when I turn around in a few seconds or, a minute, if I'm done helping this guy, she's going to be gone. So we definitely, there are times that we work through it. He's kind of sometimes a difficult person because he doesn't like to share, and he doesn't like to necessarily really, and again, I think I understand that because I feel like his experience was probably, as much as I think that mine was absolutely horrible and the most terrifying thing that I've ever done in my life, been through, I can only imagine, based on what he looked like when I can only imagine what he went through. And then also that fear of, while he was doing that, of finding me.
You,
So I think it's really hard for him a lot of the time, but we're a great support system for each other. I think that's why it's important, because he can definitely tell, like, if we're out, he can immediately tell without me even having to say anything if I'm having a difficult time, and like, okay, let's go get some fresh air, let's do what we need to do so we can both get back to a normal. And the same with him, like, I can tell if he's having a difficult time with it. So
yeah that's good. I mean, it's good to have that,
yeah,
at least
absolutely,
a shared experience, even though it's a terrible shared experience, but there definitely can lend itself to understanding as far as like, hey, I like, this is too much for me, or I can't do this, and it's not like, oh, come on, like,
absolutely,
whatever.
There's
there's not that push to whatever. You can have that.
There's never that, like, oh, you're fine. We both completely understand. Like, if he's like, I'm done, we need to leave, I'm like, yep, let's go.
Right.
So it's one of those where it's not like, but I'm having fun. Like, can't you just get over it? Like,
right.
So.
Like, no, this is
no.
impacting you. I know how it's impacting you, so we just
Absolutely.
need to leave.
Yeah.
I mean, that is good. Even if we weren't there together, you would hope for that kind of support or understanding from whoever you were with. But it's even better that's the case. So I have a weird question for you, because I've always been wondering about this, is as far as like ever since it came out, to actually like how people that were there felt about this, like when and I'm assuming maybe you haven't seen it but heard about it, like the Eminem video that he did about the shooting. I don't know. I know it's a random question, but I was just, from a survivor standpoint, did you see the video? What were your thoughts, or did you?
I haven't seen it or listened to it, because immediately when it came out, I had probably 10 people like text me and say, absolutely do not listen to this. Do not watch it. Do not listen to it. And I'm like, yep, that's all I need. Like, I tend to steer away from those things anyway. Like the whole Valiant documentary, that kind of like showcases like, this is help bring the city back together after this huge tragedy. Like I can't even watch that. Like I can't, there's no, it's just everything surrounding it just brings me so much anger still.
Yeah.
I don't even like seeing like the Vegas Strong. I don't like seeing
really?
that, like that irritates me. Like I'm just like, no. And I get the whole point behind it, but when I see it and like, resiliency and Vegas, and then they went to Vegas Stronger on the first anniversary, and it's just like, for me, there's still so much raw emotion there that it's infuriating. Like I don't even like, I'll be driving and I'll see the little Route 91 and then like Survivor. Like I don't even consider myself a survivor. I was there.
Right.
And I am still here, but I did not get shot. I did not. Yes, I went through a horrible experience. Right. Unless you were seriously injured, for me, and that's just my brain and my outlook on it. Like I was a participant in the festival. I don't see myself as a survivor. And that's been really hard for me, especially in therapy, because there's
definitely a I don't know if that's a block or if it's something or whatever.
Yeah.
Cause like, I mean, or you don't want to like maybe even not so disrespect people that are survivors or that were lost, but at the same time, I mean, it feels like you're a survivor, in some sense, but yeah.
There's a whole victim kind of mentality that I see with that. I completely get it. Like if somebody was absolutely hurt and that, yes, you're a survivor. You absolutely are. There were so many people that got shot that didn't die and got seriously injured. And I mean, we had just that lady that it's now 59 because it's been over a year and she just died. Yeah. So for me, part of that, I just don't like to bring a lot of attention to myself. I don't like to talk about, I don't even like when people know that I was there, because I'm just like, no, it's fine. It's not show and tell. Like I'm good. Like we don't need to. So those types of things, like there are things that I just,
so you don't want to have maybe the pity of it then? It's like, cause you use the word victim, and it's like, definitely talking to you definitely don't seem like you have a victim mindset about it anyway. So just the fear of that being associated with you?
I definitely don't like to be seen as, and this is just me, it's how I've always been. I don't like to be seen as a weak person. So I feel like when people know that I was there, and I've watched it happen, like people treat me differently. And I'm just like, that's not necessary. Like, while I'm not to the point where I'm like, I'm fine, because I clearly know that I'm not, like, and I can't go back to my normal. At the same time, I'm just like, you don't need to, like, I don't want to tell you about it, because that's usually their next question, like, oh my gosh, what happened? And I'm like, nope.
Listen to the podcast.
Right. No. And I'm like, no. So that's kind of where I still am, and I'm having a really hard time with that still being part of my life, because people are intrigued. I have a tattoo that is in, kind of like remembrance of it, but it's not necessarily like broadcasting like, oh my God, I was there. A lot of people, especially in Vegas, know it as 1 October, and they don't know it as Route 91 Harvest Festival. And so I get a lot of questions, and my tattoo's not even that big, but I get a lot of questions. Oh, what's that? And then I'm like, oh, it's for the Route 91 Harvest Festival. And then, oh, what's that? And I'm like, it's, like the 1 October thing. And especially if I'm not in Vegas, they have no idea. And it's like, I don't want to keep telling you. Like, if you don't know, you don't know, that's fine. Like, but it's this whole weird thing in my head where those kinds of things irritate me.
Well, okay. Well, I know then I don't want to tell you this so as to, whatever, because you're going to have your own feelings about it. But I think you're awesome. And I think that you definitely are a strong person. And so whatever that means for you, and not to say that it's labeling you as a survivor or anything, but obviously you've got a lot of strength to you. So,
thank you.
So there's definitely that. And to go through anything like this, I'm sure, people, it's a tough ordeal. So hopefully people that have gone through it have had the kind of strength that you are showing to try to get through the other side. And like I said, just get back to somewhat of a sense of normal. Or, I mean, unfortunately, sometimes we have to, what I talked about in my last podcast about sometimes when we go through life's difficulties, we have to pivot and kind of redefine what life is for us because of going through some type of struggle. And it's like, so in this case, it's like there's a little bit of a pivot that I have to do, and now life looks a little bit different, and I've got to approach it maybe a little bit different. But that doesn't mean that I'm a victim or I'm weak.
Broken.
It just or broken or anything. It's just I just have to, I'm just looking at it from a different lens, and that means that, hey, whether it means I'm a little bit more observant about things or sensitive to things, or maybe there's certain things I don't do, whatever that means, it's just, hey, life has been redefined a little bit, and I'm trying, you're trying to come out the other side in a better way with it, and and make the best of it, right?
Yeah, that's been my hardest thing, is when I did finally go back to therapy, like in my head, my reasoning was I want to go back to normal. It's been really hard for me to accept that I'll never go back to that normal. My normal is completely different now. And it's just now starting to sink in that that's still okay. Like, it's fine that I'll never get that normal back, because there's always going to be that part of me that is affected by certain things. But yeah, it's just a new normal, and it's just trying to navigate that. Like you said, it's just
it's been redefined, and you're redefining it as you go, and that's okay. And so all right, any last words of advice for anybody that's gone through something like this, or anything that you can think of? Because
no, just going back to, it's too hard, especially with extreme trauma or any kind of trauma, because again, I'm not anyone to say that your trauma is less than mine, or I can't validate that only you can. But it definitely, I think therapy helps, and there's a lot of people who absolutely don't believe in therapy and are very much against it, and think that it's horrible. But things like this, and especially traumatic experiences, I think it's extremely helpful.
Well, thank you, because I'm a proponent of therapy myself.
Yeah, obviously.
And I think it's great, but I really do appreciate you coming on and sharing your story. And I think it's an amazing story. It's in the sense of like just kind of what you had to go through. Obviously, it wasn't like it's like not the ones that you hope you have to experience or whatever. But yeah, just it's mind blowing. But that's, again, unfortunately a part of our society that we're in right now, is that those things happen, and
it's horrible.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't wish it on anybody.
No, not for. All right. Well, thanks again, Tracy, and hope everybody enjoyed this. And if you've kind of gone through some type of trauma yourself, maybe this is the push that you need to go and talk about it, because there's definitely healing in talking, and it definitely can help you along the process. So thanks again.
Thank you.
All right.